Today we're going to talk about consistency over one-time effort. A lot of people I know are tempted by shiny things, by focusing on one really big change, rather than how can we make our actions in the day-to-day more consistent. So today I'm going to make my case for why I believe that matters so very much. My name is Michelle Kline. I am the founder of DogCo Launch and the host of the DogCo Secrets podcast. So let's get into it. So when we're consistent with our business, we let something happen, which is compounding effort for results. Consistency is ultimately what drives so much in our business, is when we figure out what really matters and then we learn how to really heavily focus consistently on that thing. And it is so rare that entrepreneurs are consistent, myself included. Entrepreneurs, I think I've earned the right to speak generally on entrepreneurs at this point. Many entrepreneurs are very attracted to change. It's part of the magic quality I've noticed that brings people into entrepreneurship. They have this belief that they can create change in the world, this vision for creating something new that wasn't there before. And for all of the amazing and wonderful things about this quality, it can also undercut us a good bit, because when we are focused on new things all the time, that really undercuts the ability for anything we start to truly succeed, because success requires consistent effort over time, consistent effort applied over time. So oftentimes when we're looking at our businesses, we can get so hyper-focused on big changes. Maybe that's, I want to design this whole new revenue line for the business. I want to design a whole new business to begin with, or maybe open a second business, or completely change my branding, completely take the business in a different direction. That line of thinking can be so incredibly tempting because it is immediate. Oftentimes when we are looking at these big sweeping changes, we get ourselves into this line of thinking of that will fix everything. Many entrepreneurs would never say that out loud, but that's kind of where the belief comes from. It can completely remake this into something different. And the problem is that's not entirely wrong. It's just not also entirely helpful or productive, because whatever you initially opened or launched is worth giving a fair fighting shot, which requires consistency to do so. These big changes, these big moments can create a decent amount of change in a short window of time, but the real magic in your business and in anything you want to do is when we learn to show up daily with consistency, rather than these big one-time changes or moments, which ultimately just don't compound in our favor. So prior to opening a business, I was talking with a mastermind member recently, and I made the comment to her that there have been very few things in my life quite as clarifying about myself as a person than owning a business and getting married. Those two things, incredibly clarifying. They hold a very close mirror up to you, if you allow them to, of who you are and what you struggle with and what your growth opportunities are. So prior to owning a business, I thought of myself as a very consistent person, which I find really funny now, because not only do I find it to be wildly untrue, I also have many questions like, what did I think I was consistent at? So that is a value I would have given myself backed by nothing. And I am more so a believer now that values must be backed by behavior for them to be legitimate. Do you want to take your pet care business to the next level? The DogCo Mastermind is currently open for enrollment. I only open up twice a year. I take a group of companies in together as a group, and we work together for a full 12 months to focus on scaling your pet care business. We focus on building your operations, all the resources that you need to get there, increasing your revenue to hit your next targets, and building it in a way that keeps it like a business that you love to run. If this sounds like something that would help your business get to the next level through 2025 and 2026, go to dogcolaunch.com to learn more. Doors are open until June 6th or until all seats are taken. Otherwise, they are aspirations. And so I had the aspirations of a consistent person prior to owning a business. And in practice, I was quite undisciplined, or at least I perceive myself now to be in hindsight, now that I have worked much harder at consistency. I think I ultimately had confused commitment for consistency because there was much in my life I was very committed to. I was a grad student prior to opening a business. I was an employee. I committed in my marriage. Like, there were many things I was committed to. Commitment doesn't necessitate consistency. I do think it does to a degree, but I also think they're quite different. I was very committed to many things I was doing, but I was not consistent with those things, or all of them at least. However, when I started a business, one of the most startling experiences I have had is in starting a business and in realizing how much accountability that almost immediately added to my life. There was so much more that I was accountable to than I ever had been before. I would say prior to being a business owner, as an employee or as a student, because those were really the only other two roles I had held professionally, I really didn't have much accountability on myself because there's always someone to pick up the slack. Like, if you miss an assignment, usually there's a way to course correct that with like extra credit or whatever it may be. When you're an employee, there might be consequences to not consistently showing up, but it always will get done. Someone will step in. So I just realized I never had a lot of true accountability professionally because there was so much that now rested on my shoulders, and that was a completely new experience. And I realized when I started understanding what accountability was and how much different being a business owner was going to be, I realized that the only way to succeed was to show up consistently on a daily basis, because otherwise you're just going to fall behind. There's benefit of the business owner is so much is within your control, the benefit of that role. That also can be a little bit scary because so much is now under your control. It's real. And I realized that forming consistent practices, because the buck now stopped with me, created a very different dynamic and was really, really needed to the success of my business. I do think consistency matters a lot, even if you aren't a business owner, just as a side note, but becoming a business owner is what created that self-awareness for me. I think other people maybe find that more easily, and I didn't. I just didn't have a self-awareness that I was lacking in it. When we are consistent, so why does this matter so much in our business? We let time leverage for us in our behavior. The cumulative gains of small actions have a lot more impact over time than one big force of effort, because compounded over time, effort, it's just always going to end up being much bigger when you let it compound than if we focus on these one-time efforts of focus. I don't know who to cite this quote to, but there's a quote I like a lot, which is people often overestimate what they can get done in a day and significantly underestimate what they can get done in a month or 6 months or a year. If we apply this consistent effort of showing up every day, that will always outwin one-time leverages of impact and one-time changes or ideas that we bring into our business, because we let time leverage for us. The more I learn about the business, the more I see that time is not only the most valuable asset, it's also the most powerful if we leverage it correctly. The real consistency means focusing on the same thing. We can, or at least the type of consistency that's actually going to move your business forward. We have to figure out how to consistently focus on what the business needs us to be doing in a day-to-day capacity. So I want to talk about 3 ways that you can put more consistency into your relationship with your business. Because I want this podcast to be both aspirational. I really hope it makes you think about your relationship to your business, what you want your business to look like, But the goal is you also have tactical strategies you can implement to help get your business to that next level and to where you want it to go. So a couple ways that I found at least really helped me build consistency in the way I related to my business. Number one, first strategy is have a consistent way that you stop and start the day. So if you're in my mastermind, I called this our wind up and wind down procedures. So my husband worked for a long time for Starbucks. He was a shift supervisor. I think that was his role. And one thing that he always shared with me is that Starbucks has really well-defined operational procedures for what is supposed to happen and when. They have a very specific way that you open the store, a very specific way that you close the store. And what this leads to is a lot of consistency. If you go to a Starbucks in Oregon, more or less, your drink is going to be very similar than if you go to a Starbucks in Florida. They have incredibly consistent practices, and that creates a very consistent experience for consumers. Part of what I took from learning about their operations through my husband was learning the value of what it looks like to start the day and end the day in the same way. Now, I'm speaking mostly to business here. I'm not necessarily speaking to having like a morning or evening routine personally. I do think for some people that can be incredibly valuable to have like a consistent time you wake up, a consistent way that you start the day. There are some practices I am focused on doing. Like I'm really focused right now on breaking the habit of getting on my phone right when I get up. I have just found that this really starts my brain in a poor place. Especially if I open any form of social media, but it starts my brain's relationship to the day hooked on dopamine and really wanting to just like stay in that place. And mornings for me are when I try and do all of my deep work. I get up most days during the week at about 5 a.m. and work for 2 to 3 hours before I either go to the gym or I then get ready for the workday. And for me, this is really needed time because I am doing a lot of client-facing activities right now. I'm doing a lot of teaching, I'm doing a lot of coaching, and so I have to have that time. So it's fundamentally important. I'm on a little bit of a side quest right now, but fundamentally important to have that routine and to make sure that I use that time the way I need to. So there can be benefit for sure on a personal morning and evening routine, but I also think your business needs one. So when I had my pet care business, I had a very specific checklist for myself that I would start the day with, and then a very specific checklist I would end the day with as well, to make sure that really key components of the business were addressed, set up for success, and that I had a handle on all the noise surrounding the business. So for example, my start of day checklist, I was going to open up my software. I personally use Time to Pet. With that software, I was going to take a look at what came in overnight. I was going to check through pending requests, pending changes. I then was going to run a report on client messaging to see if anybody had reached out overnight. I then was going to do a final check off on the schedule for the day. From there, I was going to open up Slack, which is the platform I use to communicate with my employees. I was going to see if anybody had messaged us overnight. I was going to address any issues that had come in. From there, I was going to head to my inbox. You get the idea. That was a very specific way and a very specific order that I always started the day to make sure everything had been captured and processed. Likewise, at the end of the day, I had a very specific wrap-up process as well. So at the end of the day, I was going to go back into my software. And fun fact, I actually have an adapted version of this checklist that I use for DogCo now. So this is applicable no matter what business you have. How do you wind up the day? How do you wind down? So my wind down checklist, when I had my pet care business, I was going to open my software again. I was going to run a messages report, make sure everyone had gotten responded to. I was going to check back and do a quality check over the work that happened that day. I was going to make sure that every person I was accountable to for information or for an answer got a response from me, or that I at least processed what they needed and made a game plan to address it the next morning. Part of my wind down process was looking to the next day just to make sure, okay, I know what's on my schedule. I am prepared for everything. If I ever discovered something that needed more time and attention, I was going to schedule that for my deep work the next morning. So having this consistent practice can help make sure that the most important things always get addressed, that you're dealing with all the noise, and that you have a handle on what's going on in the business. And again, this is something you can adapt. I mean, honestly, you could adapt a personal wind up, wind down checklist as well. And honestly, that's not a bad idea now that I'm thinking about it. I actually took my supplements. I flossed, brushed my teeth, but be nice to floss more consistently. So, okay, we're going to add that to the checklist. So I think this can apply in a lot of different areas, but for work specifically, I highly recommend we put one in place. Number 2, so I set consistent time targets for work on a daily basis rather than necessarily time blocking specific activities. I have done a lot of different testing with time blocking and calendar management. I've landed on a system that is somewhat of a combination of time blocking for specific tasks as well as time blocking generally just to make sure key categories are covered. And that's more of what I would like to speak to in practices of consistency. So when I was building my pet care business, I had a 90-minute marketing block every morning, and I had a 2-hour operational block every afternoon. Now, I was very fine moving these around, switching their order, depending on what was going on. But I had taken a really hard critical look at how to build consistency in my business. And consistency is often tied to effort and time. So my working theory at the time, and I do stand behind this, is that, okay, if I time block really specific windows of time for marketing, for example, so that 90-minute daily window, if I am going to time block that, I'm going to make sure that every day I spend 90 minutes on marketing. Now, the activities in that window changed, and that was okay. That was part of the rules. They could change. But I had to spend 90 minutes focused on getting my business out there and on getting new business in. Similarly with operations, I didn't have a commitment to a specific activity or a specific SOP or a specific thing, but I had to spend 2 hours focused on building the business internally. So the operations, the systems, and the structure. Over time, how I used the time in those 2 windows changed for sure. I got more efficient, I got more effective, I focused on better and better strategies. But what was really neat is that because I had been consistently marketing and consistently focused on operations, I was able to drive a lot of change in my business because I had just committed to showing up every day to make it better, not necessarily to showing up every day to doing a very specific thing. And I actually think long term that really helped me build this consistency muscle. And it also helped me figure out, what was really going to move the needle forward in my business because I just showed up every day to figure it out. All right, so we have those wind up, wind down practices, setting consistent time targets for work, and then finally setting a specific output volume that you're going to hold to every day. So this is a practice that I originally heard Michael Hyatt talk about, where he talked about, I try and get 3 things done a day. Now, at the time, I misunderstood what that meant. I thought he meant he only ever does 3 things a day. And I was like, wow, that must be nice. I have way too many other things to do. And what I understand now that he meant is if I can get 3 things done, 3 important things, amidst this, at least how I interpreted it, once I understood it better. If I can get 3 important things done even against the whirlwind of the business, that was a successful day. The further I get into business, the more I understand this and agree with this principle. There are so many things that are going to take your time, that are going to work against your ability to be consistent and against the effort that you're applying to really move your business forward. And I found it was better over time to focus on how can I get a certain volume out the door of quality actions to grow my business rather than focusing on like the end result I'm trying to get to or the hugeness of a certain project of something I was trying to do. If I can make even just one move forward in my business a day, like a substantial move forward, whether that's an SOP, whether that's a policy, whether that is a new system, a new tactic we're committing to, a new piece of research I needed to put together to inform a decision, a new metric that I'm tracking, a new hire, just one significant moment for my business a day. And that became the target I aimed for. When I first heard that phrase from Michael Hyatt, I was like, only 3 things. That seems so small. Then I really started getting into it and I was like, I might be in a season where I can do one impactful thing for my business a day, like truly impactful. We got to hold the bar high here, but truly impactful thing for my business. It is actually much harder than it seems like because we'll get to the end of the day and it's like, oh my God, where did my time go? Like it went into all of these tiny, tiny things that are important and that they're always going to come up. We can get better at minimizing that noise. We can get better about putting things in place that really help us clarify like what needs to be a priority and get to focus on it. But that noise will always be there. And so we need a way that we still move things forward. And I found that if I could commit to one thing, and sometimes that was going to be the very last thing I got done that day, because it's, I said I would contribute one meaningful thing. That helped me build this consistency muscle and helped me apply the effort on a daily basis that was really going to create change in my business. Over time, these 3 practices led to a significant amount of consistency in the business and then subsequently consistent growth. And that is what I really hope you see the vision for as you start building more consistency in your business, is seeing how consistency is going to compound on itself, and that compounding effort doesn't just lead to like good feelings and good vibes. It leads to the growth of the business that compounds on itself as well. The tactics within what I personally did in my business are negotiable. There are going to be a lot of different ways to grow your pet care business, a lot of different sustainable things you can do to grow your business. The effort consistently leveraged in on a daily basis was not negotiable and should not be negotiable. So where I suggest going from here, you need to have a critical self-awareness of if you are a consistent person or if you are not. And I encourage you to be just brutally honest with yourself. It doesn't help you here to not be. Are you consistent with key things that you say you value and care about? This is going all the way back to the start of the episode where I was talking about for values to be meaningful, they have to be backed by behavior. Otherwise, they're not values, they're aspirations. Are you actually consistently showing up? And please note, this is coming from a place of, this is for me too. I had to have a real honest moment with myself about a year ago of, I have always stated verbally that I value health and I value fitness and moving my body and taking care of my body. And about a year ago, I had to get incredibly honest with myself of that was an aspiration for me. That was not a value that was backed by behavior. I had relatable thing, I imagine for many people, gained a lot of weight during the pandemic. I had a lot of habits that had gotten really out of whack. And I wasn't eating right. I wasn't exercising. I had not been going to the gym in honestly several years, like consistently. And when I was honest with myself, my actions did not reflect that this was actually a priority for me. The amount of thought process I put into it did to an extent, like it's clearly something I do. But I had to make some real changes, and I'm really proud that's a practice I have been building. I've been working with a doctor, and I've been going to the gym and, getting my health back on track. But I had to be really honest with myself, like really painfully honest in order to create change there. So start with that question. Am I really that consistent? What do I say I value that I'm not doing? What does my business need me to show up and do on a daily basis that I am not currently? And just know that you are amongst friends. We all have areas that we can create more consistency, that we need to create more consistency. And I encourage you, just pick one or two things and let's start small and let's let it start compounding and build from there. All right, my friends, I will catch you soon.